Leave right now, Mr. Coleman. Don't call your daughter, don't call anyone. Just get in your truck and drive straight to the sheriff's office. That's what the camera technician said to me, standing in my own backyard, staring at a laptop screen showing 41 seconds of footage I was never supposed to see, my son-in-law, measuring off my land at 2 a.m. for a construction crew already booked for Thursday morning. Before I tell you what happened in that sheriff's parking lot 40 minutes later, hit subscribe, because what my own daughter said to my face that night is something I will never forget. 3 weeks earlier, none of this made any sense yet. My name is Harold Whitfield. I'm 71 years old. I've lived on this 5-acre property outside Millbrook, Ohio for 38 years. My wife Ruth planted the maple trees along that back fence in 1994, and after she passed 2 years ago, that backyard was the only place I still felt like myself. I built her a birdhouse the spring before she died, hung it on the old oak by the creek, and I never once thought I'd need a security camera to protect a patch of grass and a birdhouse. But 6 months ago, my daughter Diane's husband, Derek, started asking questions that felt normal at first. Dad, you ever think about what happens to all this land when you're gone? Derek asked me over dinner in March, cutting his steak like the question meant nothing. I told him the same thing Ruth and I decided years ago. The land goes to Diane. Derek sells real estate for a firm 2 counties over, so land talk is just his language, the way weather talk is for other men. I didn't think much of it. Looking back, there were smaller things too, things I brushed off at the time because none of them seemed worth an argument with the man my daughter loved. He asked twice about my property tax assessment, once about whether the deed was still in my name alone or in some kind of trust. He mentioned, almost in passing, that a neighbor of mine, old Frank Talbot 2 properties down, had just sold his 4 acres to a developer for a number that made Derek whistle at the dinner table. I remember thinking it was strange that Derek knew Frank's sale price down to the dollar, but I was still grieving Ruth in those months, still learning how to be a man alone in a house built for 2, and I didn't have room in my chest to be suspicious of my own son-in-law. Then in May, the camera on my back porch started glitching. Static at odd hours. Motion alerts at 3 a.m. when nothing was supposed to be there. I called a local technician named Gregory Pruitt, a quiet man in his 50s who'd fixed half the security systems in Millbrook and never once overcharged a widower. Gregory came out on a Tuesday, plugged his laptop into my system, and started scrolling. Harold, how long has this camera been recording? Gregory asked, not looking up from the screen. 8 months, I said. Since Ruth passed. Felt safer having eyes on the place. Gregory went quiet for almost 90 seconds. I remember counting, because something in his face had changed. Then he turned the laptop toward me. On the screen was a man in a gray hoodie, walking my property line with a survey wheel, stopping every few feet to jot something in a notebook. Timestamp, 1:47 a.m. 11 days earlier. That's Derek, I said, before I even finished processing it. 26 years my son-in-law, and I knew that walk in the dark from 40 feet away. Gregory clicked forward. 4 days later, same hour, a different man, carrying orange survey stakes, the kind crews use right before construction breaks ground. Then a third clip. Then a fourth. By the time Gregory finished scrolling, we'd counted 11 separate nighttime visits across 5 weeks. Not one during daylight, when I could have simply walked outside and asked what was going on. Somebody's been surveying your land in the middle of the night, Harold, Gregory said. That's not maintenance. That's paperwork somebody doesn't want you to see coming. Then Gregory found the clip that changed everything. Timestamp, 9 days ago, 11:52 p.m. My daughter Diane's car, parked at the end of my driveway, headlights off. Derek got out. A second man got out of the passenger seat, wearing a company polo. Gregory zoomed in and sharpened the image until the logo resolved. Halloway Development Group. I know that name, Gregory said quietly. They bought the old Renner farm 2 years back. Bulldozed it in 6 weeks. Put up 11 houses. 11 days of surveying. 11 houses on the Renner land. My 5 acres, with Ruth's maple trees and Ruth's birdhouse, already being measured for a number on somebody's spreadsheet. Gregory didn't stop there. He told me he'd stay another hour, off the clock, because something about the pattern bothered him more than he wanted to admit out loud. He cross-referenced the visit timestamps against a public county filings database on his phone, the same one he used to check permit history for other clients. 2 names came up tied to Halloway Development Group filings in the last 90 days, Frank Talbot's old 4 acres, now cleared, and a second pending filing, unopened, unassigned to any address yet, but flagged under a name I recognized instantly, Derek Marsh, listed as the referring agent, with an $11,000 consulting fee already logged as expected income for a closing that hadn't happened. "Harold, this isn't a one-time thing," Gregory said. "Frank Talbot's sale went through clean, no complaints, so nobody was watching close enough to catch the pattern before it repeated. You're not the first target. You might just be the first one with a camera that glitched at the right moment. There's one more thing," Gregory said, voice dropping low. 2 nights ago, the system logged an attempted remote login to your camera app from an unknown device. It failed, because you never set the app up on your phone. But whoever tried it knew your account existed. That means somebody close to you handed over information you never gave out yourself. "Harold," Gregory asked, "does anyone else have power of attorney over you? Medical, financial, anything?" And that's when I remembered the papers. 6 weeks ago, Diane asked me to sign what she called just a standard update, something about Medicare paperwork. Derek's cousin, a paralegal, recommended every senior update after 70. I signed it at my own kitchen table over coffee, without reading past the first page, because I trusted my daughter with my whole life, the same way I trusted her mother for 43 years. "Leave right now, Mr. Coleman," Gregory said. "Don't ask questions. Get in your truck, drive to the sheriff's office, and bring that paperwork if you still have it. I'm calling a friend of mine, a lawyer named Nathan Voss. He handled the Renner Farm case. Tell him everything I just showed you." I drove to the sheriff's office with my hands locked at 10 and 2, Ruth's birdhouse sitting in the passenger seat, because some old animal instinct in me didn't want to leave it behind in a house I suddenly wasn't sure was still mine. Nathan Voss met me there within the hour, sharp-eyed, 40s, a decade spent fighting land fraud cases across 3 counties. He read the document I'd signed in 4 minutes flat, and his face told me everything before his mouth did. "Harold, this isn't a Medicare form," Nathan said. "This is a durable power of attorney, financial and medical both, naming Derek Marsh as your sole agent. Dated 6 weeks ago. If a cooperating physician had declared you even mildly incapacitated, Derek could have authorized the sale of this property without your signature ever appearing on the deed again. He'd need a doctor to say I'm incapacitated," I said. "I balance my own checkbook. I still change my own oil." Nathan pulled county filings up on his laptop while Gregory sat beside me, quiet, the way a man sits when he already knows the shape of what's coming. 14 minutes later, Nathan found it, a pre-signed cognitive evaluation request, filed with Dr. Warren Castile's office 9 days ago, the same night the second surveyor showed up on my land, scheduling an assessment for me 3 days out, an appointment Derek had already confirmed on my behalf. "They weren't hoping you'd fail that evaluation, Harold," Nathan said. "They were building a paper trail to fail it for you before you ever sat down in the chair." I thought about the last 6 weeks differently after that. The extra visits. "Just checking in, Dad." The way he'd laugh off every objection I raised about anything. "Dad, you just make everything more complicated," like my own judgment on my own land was an inconvenience to be managed around, filed away, quietly overruled. I thought about Ruth too, sitting in Nathan's office that night, staring at a photocopy of my own signature on a form I barely remembered signing. 43 years married to that woman, and not once in that entire marriage did I sign a single document without her reading it first, catching the fine print I always skimmed past. I used to tease her about it, call her my personal lawyer, and she'd laugh and say somebody in this house has to read past page 1. I hadn't had anybody read past page 1 for 2 years. Derek knew that. I understood, sitting in that office at 11 at night, that grief hadn't just taken my wife from me, it had made me exactly the kind of man people like Derek go looking for. Nathan spent that night building the timeline while Gregory pulled 2 more angles of footage I hadn't seen yet, one showing Derek on a phone call in my driveway, pacing, the same night as the Holloway visit, and a second, older clip from 6 weeks back, the exact night I'd signed the Medicare form, showing Derek's car parked outside my house for 11 extra minutes after he'd already said goodbye and left through the front door once. He'd doubled back, photographed something on his phone through my kitchen window before driving off for good. Nathan believed it was the signed document itself, photographed as proof for whoever he answered to at Holloway. 2 days later, Nathan and I walked into a family dinner Diane had organized at her sister-in-law's house, 12 people at that table, cousins and neighbors included, because Diane wanted to clear the air about tension she assumed was just me being stubborn about my age. Nathan brought copies of everything. I set the folder on the table myself. Derek, I said, explain the 11 survey visits to my backyard between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. over the last 5 weeks. Dad, that's not what it looks like, Derek started. Explain the $11,000 deposit wired to your personal account 4 days ago from Holloway Development Group, Nathan said, sliding the bank record across the table. That deposit was for consulting work, completely separate. Explain why Holloway's file lists this property, 5 acres at 4417 Cobb Hollow Road, as pending acquisition, with a signature on the transfer agreement that isn't Harold's handwriting, Nathan said. Diane's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. I never signed anything with Holloway, I said. I've never met anyone from that company in my life. You don't understand the market, Dad, Derek said, louder now. This land is worth $640,000 to a developer and worth nothing sitting here with 2 dying maple trees on it. Explain the cognitive evaluation you scheduled for me with Dr. Castile's office, I said, cutting him off for the first time in 26 years, for a date 3 days from tonight, that I never agreed to attend. Derek went silent. Explain the power of attorney I signed, believing it was Medicare paperwork, I said, that instead named you as my sole medical and financial agent. That form protects you, Harold, Derek said, his voice cracking now, reaching for anything. If something happened to you, we needed. You needed a doctor to sign off on incapacitation before the sale could close, Nathan said flatly. That's not protection. That's a timeline. And we have the paper trail proving it. Diane finally spoke, her voice shaking. Derek, is any of this true? He didn't answer her. He looked at me instead, and said the same 6 words he'd been saying for months, like they still had power. Dad, you just make everything complicated, I said, finishing it for him. Forging a power of attorney is a felony in the state of Ohio, Derek. Falsifying a real estate transfer is a felony. Staging a false incapacitation claim against a competent 71-year-old man is elder fraud. Nathan already has the county prosecutor's number saved in his phone, and Gregory has 11 separate video timestamps that place you on my property in the middle of the night, 5 separate weeks in a row. One of Diane's cousins, a woman named Priscilla who'd known me since Diane was in diapers, stood up from the table without a word and walked out the front door. 2 more relatives followed her within a minute, leaving their plates untouched. Nobody at that table said Derek's name again that night. 6 weeks later, Derek's real estate license was suspended pending a formal state investigation into the forged transfer documents. The Holloway development contract was voided entirely, and the $11,000 deposit was clawed back and frozen as evidence in the fraud case. Because the power of attorney itself had been secured through deception, every document built on top of it collapsed along with it. Derek's own forgery became the very thing that guaranteed he'd never own 1 square foot of that land. Diane filed for divorce 2 months after that dinner. She calls me every Sunday now, and most Wednesdays too. Gregory still checks my cameras every few months, free of charge, he says, because a man who calls the sheriff's office over 11 seconds of footage instead of losing his temper deserves a discount for the rest of his life. Nathan called me last month with one more update. Derek, 3 states away now, working a car lot outside Columbus, license still suspended, still waiting on a hearing date nobody's rushing to schedule for him. Ruth's birdhouse is back on the old oak tree by the creek, right where it's always belonged, camera pointed at it, recording nothing these days but sparrows and the wind coming through the maple leaves she planted 32 years ago.